What kind of man spends his very last $900 on a broken farm everyone else gave up on? The sign was half buried in weeds. For sale, $900. The roof was collapsing. The windows were cracked. Even the wind sounded unsure if it should stick around. And yet Jackson Mercer stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his daughter's tiny palm. Both of them staring at the wreck in front of them like it was home. Not yet, but maybe. Before we dive into this story about second chances, stubborn hearts, and the kind of family you build. Not the kind you're born with. If stories like this speak to you, hit that like button, subscribe, stick around. It helps more than you know, and it keeps stories like this alive. Jackson Mercer pulled his rusty pickup to the side of the dirt road, tires crunching over gravel. Dust settling slow like tired snow. The windshield wipers squeaked once, then gave up halfway, leaving streaks of dry mud cutting across the glass. Out there, leaning sideways like it was too exhausted to stand straight, was a wooden sign. Half the letters had faded under years of sun, wind, and forgotten time. But the numbers were still there, still legible enough for a man desperate enough to notice. For sale, $900. He killed the engine. Silence rushed in, broken only by the ticking sound of metal cooling under the Montana sun. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Calloused fingers, scarred knuckles, fingernails stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing could erase. $900. That was it. That's what it came down to. He stared at the land, if you could even call it land. The fence was more suggestion than structure. Broken posts leaned like drunk old men in every direction. The house behind it sagged to one side, roof half caved in, front porch collapsed into the weeds. To anyone else, it was just wreckage. But to Jackson, it was something else. In the rearview mirror, he caught the reflection of Sophie. Curled up in the back seat, knees hugged to her chest, face pressed against a stuffed raccoon she refused to give up. 8 years old, too small to carry this kind of life, but here she was holding it anyway. Jackson sighed. Not a tired sigh, not frustrated either. It was the sound of a man scraping the bottom of what hope looked like. He reached over, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The deed, already signed, already paid for. $900, every last penny they had. Guess we're home now, he muttered. No applause, no dramatic music. Just the wind pushing through brittle grass and that crooked sign nodding back, like it knew a secret the world had long forgotten. He stepped out. Boots hit dirt, hard, dry, stubborn earth, the kind of ground that either broke you or taught you how to stand. Jackson stood there, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets, staring out at the broken fence line. But his mind wasn't here, not yet. It drifted back, like a bad habit, to where this all started unraveling. He remembered the hospital waiting room, the smell of antiseptic, coffee gone cold in a paper cup, and a clock that refused to move. He remembered the doctor standing there with her hands folded too tightly, like someone trying to hold the world together with fingers that were never strong enough. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer, there's nothing more we can do." That's how it ended. 14 years of marriage gone in one sentence. Cancer didn't knock. It just walked straight through the door and took her. And then came the layoffs. He was good at his job, one of the best mechanics the plant had ever seen. But the factory didn't care about loyalty, or good hands, or men raising little girls on their own. Cost-cutting, they said. Nothing personal. It always is. After that, it was just numbers. Numbers that shrank. Rent, groceries, gas, co-pays for hospital bills that didn't save anyone. He could still see it. That morning, sitting at the kitchen table staring at the glow of his phone screen. The banking app loading slow, as if it already knew he wouldn't like what it had to say. Balance, $927.53. $900 to buy this land. 27 and change to survive whatever came next. No backup plan, no safety net. Just a little girl with a stuffed raccoon and a father running on fumes. A truck roared past on the main road, kicking up a cloud of dust that dragged him back to the present. Jackson blinked, shoved the memory aside, and exhaled. It didn't matter now. None of it did. The only way left was forward or nowhere at all. He turned toward the truck, glanced once more at Sophie still sleeping in the back seat, then looked out at the battered house, the crumbling barn, the stubborn earth. This wasn't about building something perfect. It was about proving something broken could still stand. The gate didn't open so much as it surrendered. Jackson gripped the splintered wood, gave it one push, and the whole thing groaned like an old man with bad knees. One of the hinges snapped clean off the gate, tilted sideways, and hung there, crooked but stubbornly refusing to fall. Sophie stepped out from the truck, rubbing her eyes. Her shoes crunched over gravel as she moved to her father's side, small hand reaching instinctively for his. "Is this it?" she asked quietly. Jackson nodded, words caught somewhere between his chest and throat. "Yeah, this is it." They crossed the threshold. Not that the gate was stopping anyone hadn't for years. The dirt path ahead was barely visible beneath tangled weeds, knee-high in some spots, shoulder-high in others. A broken fence ran along one side, giving up the pretense of keeping anything in or out. Off in the distance, the house waited, or what was left of it. The roof sagged heavy on one side. One window was boarded. The others cracked like spider webs. The front porch slanted so far down it kissed the ground. A sudden flutter of wings shattered the silence. 3 crows launched from the brittle skeleton of a dead tree near the barn, black shapes against the pale sky. Their cries sharp, echoing longer than seemed fair. Sophie flinched. Her fingers tightened around Jackson's. "You okay?" he asked, glancing down. She nodded, but her eyes never left the house. And then came the sound. A high-pitched screech, metal against metal, slow, strained, and strangely human. Like something breathing wrong. Jackson scanned the yard until he spotted it. An old water spigot, bent sideways, still dripping. Each drop made the pipe tremble, each tremble dragged out that hollow, aching sound. Drip, whine, drip, whine. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, persistent. The kind of noise you could almost ignore until it was all you heard. Sophie shifted closer. "It's kinda creepy." "Yeah," Jackson agreed. "Little bit." They kept walking. Past the gate, past the overgrown grass, past the skeleton of a swing set missing one chain, its last swing hanging sideways, tangled in weeds. The air smelled like old wood, damp dirt, and something else, something heavier. Like time itself had rotted here and nobody bothered to clean it up. When they reached the steps, or where steps should have been, Jackson paused. "This isn't gonna be easy," he said, half to Sophie, half to himself. Sophie looked up, her grip still firm but her voice steady. "It doesn't have to be easy, just ours." For a second, Jackson didn't say anything. Then he smiled, small, thin but real. "Yeah, kiddo, just ours." It was the sound that caught his attention first, not the wind, not the birds, something sharper, mechanical, precise. Jackson stood near the front of the crumbling barn, scanning the fence line, when he heard it again. A soft click, then the faint whir of gears turning, then silence followed by the hiss of something being unscrewed. His gaze drifted toward the small cottage sitting on the neighboring property. From this distance, it looked in better shape than his. Newer roof, patched siding, but still humble. No signs of luxury, no flower beds, no welcome mat, just function and silence. Except for her, a woman, mid-30s maybe. Lean frame, dark hair pulled back into a loose braid that kept falling forward as she bent over a table set up on her porch. She wasn't gardening, she wasn't painting, she wasn't doing anything you'd expect from someone who moved out here for peace and quiet. She was dismantling something. Jackson squinted. Metal parts lay scattered across the table. Circular panels, wiring bundles, small circuit boards. She worked with a kind of precision that didn't match the setting. Hands moving quick, confident, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Her fingers twisted a wrench around a bolt, popped the casing free, then leaned in, studying the insides of the device like it was a puzzle only she could solve. It wasn't farming equipment, that was for sure. It looked military. Or close enough. A long antenna rested against the porch railing. The main frame was a smooth black shell, no labels, no markings. Something about the angles, the texture screamed classified. Jackson frowned, crossing his arms. The kind of frown that came with living too long in a world that teaches you not to trust what doesn't make sense. Sophie appeared at his side, tugging his sleeve. "What's she doing?" "I don't know," Jackson murmured, eyes narrowing. "But that is not a lawn-mower." As if sensing eyes on her, the woman paused, looked up. Her gaze locked onto Jackson's instantly. No smile, no wave, just an unreadable stare, cool, steady, and almost challenging. Neither of them said a word. Then, without breaking eye contact, she turned back to her work. Tightened one screw, loosened another. Jackson exhaled slowly. His gut whispered the same thing it always did when something wasn't adding up. Keep your distance, for now. Later that afternoon, Jackson found himself near the fence again. Not by accident, not exactly. Something about that woman gnawed at the edges of his curiosity. Like a loose thread daring him to pull. She was still there, still working. Except now, a tarp had been spread across the ground beside her, filled with more disassembled parts. Gears, panels, wiring so complex it looked less like machinery and more like the insides of something alive. Jackson cleared his throat. The woman didn't look up. You always tear apart government property on Sundays? He asked, voice measured but edged. A pause. Then she finally glanced over, eyes sharp but unreadable. It's Saturday. He blinked. Fair point. Silence stretched between them. Not comfortable, not hostile either, just cautious. Like two dogs meeting at a gate neither of them trusts. You moved in recently? Jackson tried again, folding his arms. Couple weeks. Didn't notice. Not really my problem, she said, tightening a bolt without looking up. Her hands moved with the same precise rhythm, like someone who fixed things not for pleasure but because broken things annoyed her. Jackson bristled slightly but kept his tone flat. Not much traffic out here. Folks tend to notice when someone new shows up. Guess I'm not here to be noticed. The click of her wrench punctuated the sentence. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Right. Just happens that you're living across from the only guy dumb enough to buy this place. A flicker of something crossed her face, humor maybe or recognition. But it vanished just as quick. Guess that makes two of us, she said, finally setting the wrench down. She wiped her hands on a rag, stood and faced him fully now. Closer than before, enough for him to catch details. Faint scars along her knuckles. Boots worn but cleaned. Posture straight, too straight for someone retired from regular life. Jackson tilted his head. Name's Jackson, he offered, not warm, not cold, just factual. The woman hesitated, just long enough for it to be noticeable. Then, Alex. No handshake, no smile, just names traded across a fence that felt a mile wide. Jackson's gaze flicked once more toward the machine on her table. That whatever that is doesn't look like it belongs out here. Alex crossed her arms. Neither do most things. A beat of silence. Then she turned back to her work. Conversation over. Or maybe paused. Jackson stood there a moment longer, jaw set. Thoughts running faster than his mouth could catch. Then he turned. Walked back toward the house but didn't stop glancing over his shoulder. Something about her didn't sit right, and that somehow bothered him more than anything else. Jackson was halfway through pulling weeds near the side of the barn when he noticed Sophie wasn't by his side anymore. He straightened, wiped the dirt from his hands, and scanned the yard. There, just beyond the broken fence line, her small figure standing, facing Alex. For a second, Jackson froze. His instinct screamed to call her back, but something about the scene held him still. Sophie stood there, thin arms crossed over her chest, gripping her stuffed raccoon like it was some kind of shield. Her ponytail was crooked dirt smudged across one cheek. Alex was crouched by her table again, hands deep in the guts of that strange machine until she wasn't. She felt Sophie's presence. You could see it. The way her spine stiffened, the way her fingers paused mid-turn on a screwdriver. Then slowly Alex turned her head, eyes narrowing at first, scanning the child like someone reading a blueprint. Sophie tilted her head, eyes wide, serious in the way only 8-year-olds can be. Are you fixing a robot? The question dropped into the air like a pebble into still water. Small, innocent, completely out of place and yet perfect. For the first time, something in Alex's face shifted. Not a smile, not exactly, but the edges softened. The sharp lines around her mouth loosened, the tension in her shoulders dropped just enough to notice. Her gaze flicked to the machine, then back to Sophie. Not exactly, Alex replied. Her voice was different now, less steel, more human. It's a drone, kinda like a robot with wings. Sophie's eyes widened even further. Like the ones that fly over the mountains? I saw one on TV. My dad said they cost more than a house. Alex huffed, a sound that wasn't quite a laugh but wasn't dismissive either. Yeah, pretty close. Sophie stepped closer, inspecting the mess of wires like she understood any of it. Why's it broken? Alex paused, fingers drumming against her knee. Because sometimes things stop working, and someone's gotta figure out why. Sophie nodded solemnly, as if that was the most reasonable answer in the world. Then after a moment, do you live here now? Looks that way. Another pause, softer this time. You got a dog? Alex blinked. No. Shame, Sophie said, giving a small sigh. Dogs make everything better. From the distance, Jackson stood watching, arms crossed, lips twitching somewhere between relief and surprise. Alex met Sophie's gaze one last time, her lips pressing together, then easing. Yeah, she murmured, I guess they do. The next morning brought a wind that carried the kind of chill you feel in your teeth. Jackson stood near the old storage shed, if you could still call it that. Half the roof sagged inward, a dozen warped planks hung by rusted nails, threatening to fall with the next stiff breeze. He sighed, rolling his shoulders, then grabbed the hammer off the back of his truck. All right, he muttered to himself, one board at a time. The first nail bent sideways. The second one snapped. By the third, Jackson was already shaking his head, jaw tight, breath coming shorter than it should. That's not gonna hold. The voice came from behind. Jackson turned, hammer half raised. There she was, Alex, standing by the fence line, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back tighter than yesterday. Her expression was the same mixture of flat and unimpressed, but something was different. She was holding a cordless drill. Figured you could use an extra set of hands, she added before he could answer. Jackson blinked. You know, most people say good morning first. Good morning. She deadpanned, walking past him without waiting for permission. She sized up the shed, nudged one of the loose beams with her boot, then nodded like she'd seen enough. You got any spare 2x4s? She asked. In the back of the truck, maybe. Grab 'em! Jackson hesitated. Every stubborn bone in his body wanted to tell her no. This was his problem, his land, his mess to clean up. But he didn't. Instead, he handed her the boards. For the next hour, they worked in near silence. No small talk, no forced pleasantries. Just the steady rhythm of hammers hitting nails, drills biting into wood, and boards sliding into place. At one point, Jackson risked a glance her way. Her hands moved like muscle memory, efficient, practiced. Not delicate, but precise. Like someone who didn't just learn this, someone who lived it. Where'd you pick this up? He asked, halfway between curiosity and suspicion. Learned some things, Alex replied, tightening a screw. Jobs where you either fix what's broken or you don't come back. Jackson nodded, letting the answer sit. They finished the last beam just as the wind shifted again, sending a swirl of dust across the yard. The shed still leaned a little, but it wasn't threatening to collapse anymore. Not today. Alex brushed dirt off her jeans, adjusted her sleeves, then turned to leave. "No charge," she said over her shoulder. Jackson smirked despite himself. Didn't ask. But by the time he finished the sentence, she was already halfway back to her porch. Something about that felt heavier than it should have. Not bad, not unwelcome, just unfamiliar. Later that day, Jackson found himself back near the fence line. Not because he meant to, or maybe exactly because he did. Alex sat on the edge of her porch, legs stretched out, back leaning against one of the support beams. The half-disassembled drone still sat on the table next to her, wires spilling like tangled vines. She was cleaning something. A set of tools, maybe wiping them down, organizing them in neat military rows. Jackson approached slow, hands in his pockets, boots crunching over gravel. "Didn't take you for someone who likes fixing things just for fun," he offered. Half a statement, half a question. Alex didn't look up right away. "It's not for fun," he nodded, leaning against one of the fence posts, arms crossed. "Yeah, figured." A long beat passed. The kind that doesn't feel empty, just careful. "You ever work in aviation?" he asked, tilting his chin toward the machine. She hesitated, just a blink. Then her hands kept moving. "Sort of?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Sort of." Alex clicked a small piece back into place, set it down carefully. "Military." The word hung between them. Not loud, not whispered, just placed. "Army?" Jackson asked. "Air Force," she corrected, voice steady but clipped. He nodded, letting that settle. "Pilot?" "Operations, surveillance, systems maintenance, mostly tech." Mostly. Her fingers stilled for a second, just long enough for him to notice, then kept working like nothing had been said. Jackson studied her. The posture, the precise way she laid out every tool, the economy of movement, the way her eyes scanned things, always calculating, always one step ahead. But when his gaze drifted to her face just for a second, he caught something else, a shadow behind the steadiness, something quiet, brittle, tucked just out of reach. "You retire?" he asked. A pause. "No." That was it. No elaboration, no explanation, just two letters strung together and sealed shut. Jackson thought about pressing, about asking why someone who didn't retire wasn't still in. But he didn't, because some questions aren't invitations, they're walls. Instead, he nodded, tapping his fingers against the fence post. "Well, guess this town attracts all kinds." Alex smirked faintly, just a twitch of the mouth. "Yeah, guess it does." Jackson pushed off the fence. "See you around." "Yeah," she said softly, not looking up. "You will." And for some reason he believed that. It started innocent enough. Jackson had walked over with a couple of extra boards, figuring if Alex was the kind of neighbor who showed up uninvited to fix roofs, then maybe he could return the favor. Not that she asked. She never did. When he reached her porch, she wasn't there. The door stood slightly ajar, the screen hanging crooked. From inside drifted the low hum of a radio, static mixed with soft guitar chords. Nobody answered when he knocked. "Alex," he called. No answer. He waited. A minute. maybe 2. Long enough for curiosity to tiptoe past manners. He wasn't trying to snoop, not really, but his eyes drifted anyway. Across the workbench, across the porch, then through the open window. That's when he saw it. Laid out on her dining table, neat, deliberate, was a large map. A blueprint, actually. Thin blue lines on crisp white paper. He could make out the roads, the hills, the creek that ran along the south side of town. And there, dead center, circled in red pen, his property. But it wasn't the circle that punched the air out of his lungs. It was the letterhead. Top corner, clear as daylight. Quinn Holdings. His stomach tightened. Every muscle in his jaw locked. Quinn. The same name plastered across every for sale sign on the edge of town. The same name whispered in every diner booth on every gas station receipt. The corporation that had spent the last 5 years buying out half the county. Developers, land snatchers, corporate vultures dressed in tailored suits. Jackson took a step back, hands curling into fists without meaning to. His breath felt heavier than it should. A loose sheet of paper fluttered near the edge of the table. Another diagram. He caught a glimpse of proposed structures. Roads that didn't exist yet. Buildings that had no business being here. A future version of Dry Creek that looked nothing like home. Footsteps. Fast, closing in. Alex appeared from around the side of the house carrying a box of spare parts. She froze the second she saw him, standing there, eyes locked on the table through the window. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved, neither spoke. Then Alex's face shifted, a flicker of realization chased by something colder, defensive, guarded. "What are you doing?" she asked, not sharp, not accusing, but close. Jackson swallowed. Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing. The air between them felt thinner than before, heavier, and for the first time since they met, Jackson wasn't sure which one of them was the stranger here. Jackson didn't wait for her to speak. His boots hit the porch steps harder than intended. The boards groaned under the weight. He shoved the door open, no knocking this time. The screen slammed against the frame as he stepped inside. Alex was 2 steps behind him, dropping the box of parts on the floor with a dull thud. "Jackson." He spun around, eyes sharp, jaw locked. Don't say my name like that." She stiffened, hands at her sides, shoulders squared. His gaze flicked to the table, back to her, then to the map. The blueprint with its red circles, its corporate logos, its ugly truth spread wide in daylight. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like," he said, voice low but vibrating like something holding back a crack in the dam. Alex didn't answer. "Quinn Holdings," Jackson growled. "Every farmer in this county knows that name. You think we don't talk? You think we don't notice when someone starts buying out our neighbors one by one until there's nothing left but concrete and promises?" Her lips pressed tight. "It's not. You're with them." His voice cut sharper. "You've been with them this whole time." "No." It came fast, too fast. "It's not like that." "Then how is it, Alex?" His hands motioned to the map, fingers trembling not with fear but with something heavier. Betrayal. What, you just happened to move in next to the last idiot crazy enough to buy this place. Watch me fail. Wait until I fold so you can run back to Daddy with the paperwork. Her face darkened. Don't. Oh, I get it now. Jackson snapped, pacing 2 steps, then back. The way you show up, help fix a roof, play nice with my daughter, hell. Maybe you were gonna wait till we were tired enough, desperate enough, and then you make the offer, same as the rest. Stop it, Alex snapped. Stop talking like you know me. Jackson's chest rose and fell, fists clenched, breathing too hard. You should have told me who you were. She stepped forward, close now, eyes flashing not with guilt but with something that surprised him. Hurt. You think I wanted this? You think I planned this? Didn't you? For a long second, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind rattling the loose gutter outside, the groan of that old water spigot still dripping, still whining like the house itself knew this was breaking apart. Alex swallowed. I left that world behind, Jackson. Yeah? His voice dropped, heavy. Doesn't look like it. He turned toward the door. Don't, she said quietly. But he was already walking, already done listening, and for the first time since he set foot on this land, it didn't feel like a beginning anymore. It felt like something ending. Jackson, wait! Her voice followed him halfway down the porch steps, tight, fractured, but not desperate. He stopped, didn't turn, just stood there. Hands clenching and unclenching, jaw ticking like a clock that was about to break. Alex stepped forward, closing the distance but not too close. Her boots crunched over gravel. Her breath came uneven now, shoulders rising, falling. I'm not here because of Quinn Holdings, she said. I'm here because I walked away from it. Jackson let out a sharp breath, part laugh, part disbelief. Right, sure you did. No, Alex bit back. I mean it. He turned just enough to catch her face in the corner of his vision. So what? You're what, a runaway CEO? The prodigal daughter who suddenly grew a conscience? Her mouth pressed into a line. Something like that. You expect me to believe that? His voice was rough now, frayed at the edges. That you just woke up one day, looked around and thought, you know what? Forget the family empire. I'm gonna go live next to some broken-down mechanic and his kid. Her hands fisted at her sides. I didn't choose you. That hit harder than either of them expected. Alex blinked, then softer. I chose away from all of it, away from him. Jackson shook his head. Doesn't matter. Same blood, same name. It does matter. She snapped. You have no idea what it's like to grow up under a man like that, to breathe in a house where control is oxygen, where nothing is ever yours, not even your own damn life. Silence, except for the wind scraping dead leaves across the driveway. She swallowed, forcing the words past whatever was choking her. I walked out. I burned every bridge and I've been running. No, not running. Done. I'm done. Jackson's eyes hardened. And now you're here, hiding, waiting. No, Alex whispered, trying to remember what living feels like. For a long second, neither moved, but something inside Jackson stayed locked, closed. Too many years of losing. Too many people promising they weren't like the others until they were. You should have told me, he said finally, voice hollow. She opened her mouth. No words came. He shook his head. Doesn't matter now. Jackson turned. This time he didn't stop. Walked back across that crooked fence line, back toward a house that felt lonelier now than it ever had. Behind him, Alex stood there, hands shaking, but not from cold. By sunset, the wind had shifted. Cold, restless, the kind of wind that made an empty place feel emptier. Jackson stood at the edge of the fence, arms crossed, watching as Alex packed her tools into a battered duffel. No words, no more arguments, just silence. When she slung the bag over her shoulder, she paused, glanced back. Her eyes held something he couldn't name. Regret, anger, maybe both. "You made yourself clear," she said quietly. Jackson didn't answer, just tipped his chin toward the road. Without another word, Alex walked back down the gravel path, past the gate, past the cracked fence, her figure shrinking until it disappeared into the line of trees at the far end of the property. Gone. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, heavy in his chest, like the air itself was pressing in. Sophie didn't ask where she went, didn't say a word, just watched from the porch, hugging that stuffed raccoon tighter than usual. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, her small shape curled under a quilt stitched from years of somebody else's stories, Jackson stepped outside. The sky was clear. Stars stretched in every direction, sharp and cold against the black. He walked to the old well, the one behind the barn, dry for years. Just a circle of cracked stones and a rusted crank that no longer turned. Jackson sat on the edge, elbows on his knees, shoulders heavy. From his pocket he pulled it out. A seashell, a small spiral shell. Soft ivory streaked with faded blue. Nothing special to anyone else, but to him it was the last thing she gave him. His wife, years ago. A trip they never could afford but somehow made happen. Sophie had been 3, too young to remember. She handed it to him on that beach, smiled that half-tired smile. "For luck," she'd said, "or for something." Jackson turned it over in his fingers now, ran his thumb along the ridges, closed his eyes. Funny thing about a shell, it holds echoes. You press it to your ear, you hear the ocean, even when the ocean's nowhere near. Even when it's long gone. He squeezed it tight, not for luck, not for miracles, just to remember there's still something left to hold. The wind brushed past, soft, warmer now, and for the first time all day Jackson breathed. The sky broke just after noon, not with rain, not yet, but with a darkness that didn't belong to daylight. Clouds stacked over the mountains, thick, bruised, churning like something alive. Jackson stood on the porch, hands on his hips, watching the wind drag sheets of dust across the field. The air smelled different. Electric, metallic, the kind of smell that says, whatever's coming, you're not ready. A low rumble rolled through the hills, then another, closer this time. Inside, Sophie pressed her face to the window. "Daddy." "I know." Jackson cut in, already moving. He grabbed the hammer, a coil of rope, a handful of nails, whatever would fit in 2 hands. "Get your boots, now!" By the time they reached the shed, the wind had picked up sharp enough to snap the corner of a tarp clean off the roof. It flapped like a trapped bird, cords whipping wild. "Hold this," Jackson barked, thrusting the end of a rope into Sophie's small hands. She gripped it tight, boots digging into the mud as the wind yanked against her. He climbed halfway onto the roof, feet slipping, fingers numb, trying to lash the tarp down before the real storm hit. A gust caught him square in the chest, nearly pitching him sideways. Another clap of thunder cracked overhead, so loud it rattled the metal sheet walls. Sophie's voice cut through the howl. "Daddy, it's too strong!" I know. He gritted, looping the rope around a beam, pulling with everything left in his arms. Just hold it 10 more seconds. But the sky had other plans. The first wave of rain hit like a fist, sheets of water slamming sideways, soaking them both in seconds. The wind screamed, bending the trees nearly flat. Something heavy crashed near the barn. He didn't dare look to see what. "Inside!" he yelled. "Now!" Sophie dropped the rope and sprinted toward the house. Jackson gave the tarp one final yank, tied a sloppy knot around a post, then slid down, boots hitting mud, already running after her. They slammed the door just as another gust rattled it so hard the hinges screamed. Inside, the house shook. Water dripped from the cracked window frame. The wind shoved against the walls like it wanted in. Floorboards trembled. Somewhere a gutter peeled free and crashed into the dirt. Sophie stood in the middle of the room, soaked to the skin, breathing like she had just outrun a bear. Jackson dropped to his knees, pulled her close, held her tighter than he meant to. "It's okay," he whispered, whether for her or himself he wasn't sure. "We're okay." But even as he said it, the wind answered back, like it knew this wasn't over, not yet. The storm didn't ease. If anything, it grew meaner, ripping branches from trees, snapping power lines somewhere in the distance. The lights flickered, then died, leaving the house swallowed in gray. Jackson shoved a dresser against the back door, nails in his teeth, hands shaking from cold, adrenaline, and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't wait for morning. A sudden bang rattled the front porch. His heart kicked hard. He grabbed the crowbar leaning against the wall. "Stay here," he told Sophie, who nodded wide-eyed, clutching her raccoon tighter than she ever had. Another bang. Then a voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Open the damn door!" For half a second, Jackson wasn't sure he heard right. But the next knock wasn't a fist, it was the heavy stomp of a boot kicking. He yanked the door open against the wind, and there she was. Alex! Soaked, wind-whipped, carrying a coil of rope in one hand and a toolbox in the other. Without waiting for permission, she shoved past him. "Where's your attic access?" she barked, scanning the ceiling. What are you doing?" Jackson stammered. "Your roof's lifting on the north side. You've got 10 minutes, maybe less, before it peels off. I've got straps. Let's go." For a second, Jackson just stared. Then his feet remembered how to move. Together, they hauled rope, braces, whatever they could find. Jackson pulled open the attic hatch. Alex climbed like she'd done it 100 times. Her boots thudded above as she dragged straps across beams, cinching the frame tighter against the wind. Jackson worked from below, feeding rope through cracked window frames, tying knots around whatever wasn't nailed down. And through it all, Sophie followed with the flashlight, small hands steady, beam of light cutting through dust and rain and fear. No one spoke much. Didn't need to. Just work. Just breathe. Just keep the walls standing. A gust hit harder than any before. The whole house shuddered. Somewhere a window cracked, spiderweb lines splitting the glass. But it held. It all held. When the worst finally passed, when the rain softened from fists into fingers, they collapsed in the middle of the living room, wet, muddy, breathless. For the first time since the wind started, the silence wasn't scary. It was relief. Jackson leaned back against the wall, glancing over at Alex. She didn't look at him, just sat there, head resting on her knees, hands still clenched like the storm hadn't quite left her fingers yet. But she was there. She showed up, and somehow that meant more than he could say. By morning, the sky was something else entirely. Clear, sharp blue, the kind of blue that only shows up after something breaks. The wind was gone. The rain, a memory. In its place, the soft hush of a world catching its breath. Jackson sat on the front steps, boots muddy, elbows resting on his knees beside him. Alex. Her braid hung loose, now strands of hair escaping, sticking to her damp skin. Her eyes followed the clouds like they held answers she wasn't sure how to ask for. Sophie wandered the yard, barefoot, picking through puddles like they were treasure. For a long while, nobody said anything. Then Jackson broke the quiet. "Didn't think you were coming back." Alex didn't answer right away. She pulled a splinter from her palm, flicked it aside. "Didn't think I was either." A soft breeze nudged the broken wind chime hanging from the porch beam. It clinked once, then fell still again. Jackson sighed. Not heavy, not sharp, just the kind that lives in a man's ribs after too many years of things not going the way they were supposed to. "I used to think," he said, voice low, "that if I just worked hard enough, patched every hole, fixed every busted thing, maybe life would stop falling apart." Alex's lips curved, not a smile, something smaller, sadder. "How'd that work out for you?" He chuckled, a sound dry and half ashamed. "About how you'd expect." She nodded. "Yeah, same." Silence stretched. But this time it wasn't tight, wasn't sharp, just space, honest space. Jackson glanced over, studied her face. "You ever regret it? Walking away?" Her fingers traced the edge of her boot. "Every day," she admitted, "and not for a second." He let that roll around in his head. Tried it on. It fit too well. "I don't even know who I am without it sometimes." Alex added, voice quieter now. "Without the fight, without the war, without him." Her meaning wasn't lost on him, not even a little. Jackson nodded slow. "Yeah, me neither, not since." His voice caught. "Didn't finish. Didn't need to." Alex glanced at him sideways. Saw it. The weight behind his eyes. The hollow space where something used to live. For a long second she didn't speak. Then gently, like setting something fragile on a shelf. "We both walked away from something." "Yeah," Jackson agreed. "Guess now we figure out what we walked toward." A beat passed. Then Sophie's laughter echoed across the yard, light, bright, like none of this had ever happened. And somehow that sound was enough. It started with the sound, not loud, not frantic, just precise. Tires crunching over gravel, slow, measured. Like the driver wasn't in a hurry because men like him never had to be. Jackson stood from the porch steps. His jaw tightened before he even saw the car. A black sedan crested the hill. A machine too polished for a place like this. Chrome trim, tinted windows, paint so flawless it reflected the broken fence line like a cruel joke. It rolled to a stop at the edge of the property, engine purring low, steady like it was breathing. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, immaculate, gray tailored suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, because power this old didn't need a tie to prove itself. His silver hair was neatly combed, not a strand out of place. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes, but not the weight of his gaze. Richard Quinn. Jackson didn't need an introduction. You could feel it, like barometric pressure before a storm. Alex stood beside him now, arms crossed tight, spine locked straight, but not rigid, more braced, like someone who already knew what this would cost. Richard shut the car door with a softness that felt louder than a gunshot. His gaze swept the house, the barn, the patchy yard, not with curiosity, with calculation. Then he spoke, low, controlled, perfectly enunciated. "Well, I'd say you've made interesting choices." Alex didn't flinch. "Didn't expect you to find me this fast." A thin smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not kind, not amused, just efficient. "You know how this works." Jackson stepped forward, planting his boots in the dirt. "You're trespassing." Richard didn't even glance his way. "This isn't your concern." Jackson's fists curled. "It is now." For the first time, Richard turned to face him fully. Removed the sunglasses, slow, deliberate. His eyes were a kind of cold that didn't come from weather. Pale, sharp, surgical. "Mr. Mercer," he said, rolling the name like something unfamiliar. "A man of admirable optimism." His gaze flicked to the house. "Brave or foolish, depending on how this plays out." Jackson didn't move, didn't blink. Richard returned his focus to Alex. "Come home," he said simply. Not a request, a command dressed in velvet. "No," Alex replied, no hesitation, no tremble. Richard sighed, slow, disappointed. "I raised you to understand everything has a price." "I'm done paying yours," she shot back. A pause. Heavy, measured. Then Richard slipped his sunglasses back on, smoothed his jacket, and said with a finality sharp enough to cut steel, "Then I'll buy everything around you, until there's nothing left but the dirt under your feet." He turned, opened the car door, stepped inside. The sedan pulled away, quiet, clean, leaving behind nothing but dust and the kind of silence that weighs heavier than thunder. Richard didn't leave right away. The sedan sat there, engine idling, low like a distant growl. The window rolled down, smooth, mechanical, precise. "Alex," his voice carried, measured, heavy, filling the air like concrete. "We're going to have a conversation now." Alex didn't move, didn't blink, but Jackson saw it. The way her jaw set, the subtle shift in her stance. Bracing, like she'd been here before more times than anyone should. She stepped forward just enough. "Fine, but it's the last one." Richard tilted his head, a gesture that might have passed for amusement if not for the frost behind it. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic." Jackson hovered near the porch, not leaving, not interrupting, just there. Richard's eyes never left his daughter. "You've had your little experiment, your rebellion." His fingers tapped the car door. "It ends now." "No," Alex said, voice like tempered steel. His expression didn't change, didn't flicker. Come back, clean, quiet, no press, no fallout, not happening. A pause, then softer, more dangerous. Alexandra, you know what happens next if you don't. I do, she shot back. I've always known. Richard exhaled through his nose, disappointed, not surprised. Then let me make this clear. He leaned forward slightly, not a threat. Not exactly, just truth, weaponized. You have two options. His fingers lifted, counting them one by one. One, you come home. Quietly, no drama, no headlines. We fold this mess back into the narrative. The world never has to know. His hand dropped to the second finger. Or two, you disappear. I wipe every record, every tie, no inheritance, no name, no protection. He let that sink in. Let the silence fill every crack. No third option, he finished. For a beat, Alex said nothing. Then slowly, carefully, then you better start rewriting the family tree. Richard's lips pressed thin. He tapped the steering wheel twice. A sound like punctuation. So be it. His gaze flicked toward Jackson, just long enough to let the message land. Then back to Alex. You were always predictable. The window rolled up. The sedan pulled away. Dust curling behind the tires like smoke off a gun. Alex stood there, shoulders locked, chest rising, falling but steady. Jackson stepped closer. You okay? Her answer came quiet, flat. No. But her eyes never left the road. Richard didn't drive off right away. The sedan sat idling, a glossy black shape against the dusty road. The kind of car that didn't belong here. The kind of man that never intended to. The driver stepped out briefly, tall, dressed in the same shade of forgettable black. He opened the back door like this was some boardroom, not a broken-down farm. Richard stepped out again, calm, deliberate. He adjusted the cuff of his suit as if dirt itself was offensive. Alex didn't flinch, didn't move, just folded her arms, her spine straight as a steel beam. I already told you, I'm not coming back. Richard sighed. Not dramatic, not performative, just tired. But not the kind of tired that comes from weakness, the kind that comes from knowing you never lose. You always did mistake stubbornness for principle, he said quietly. Then his gaze slid, slow, heavy, toward Jackson. A pause, a measured pause. Then with that same soft, scalpel-precise tone, you have no idea who you're dealing with. The words didn't come loud, didn't come angry, but they cut deeper than shouting ever could. Jackson met his gaze, jaw locked. Didn't blink, didn't breathe for a second too long. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Men like you think standing in the dirt makes you righteous. He stepped closer, just enough for the air to thin. But dirt doesn't save you. It just buries you slower. For a second, the only sound was the wind scraping dust against metal. Even the birds stayed quiet. Then Richard straightened his jacket, flicked an invisible speck from his sleeve, and turned back toward the car. As the driver opened the door, Richard paused once more, glanced over his shoulder. You'll learn, he said softly, both of you. Then the car door shut, smooth, final. The sedan rolled down the gravel road, tires humming like a distant threat you couldn't unhear. Long after the dust settled, the silence stayed, heavy, cold, pressed into the bones. Jackson let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Alex didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the road as if waiting to see what part of her past would come crawling back next. And Jackson, for the first time since buying this land, felt something he hadn't expected. Doubt. Real. Heavy. Bone deep. The town hall wasn't fancy. Never had been. Just four walls, a leaky roof, and a crooked flagpole out front that hadn't flown a flag in years. But today it felt smaller than usual. Claustrophobic. Heavy with something that had nothing to do with the cracked ceiling or the flickering lights. Every seat was filled. Old ranchers, shop owners, retired folks who'd been here since before the pavement. All of them packed shoulder to shoulder, murmuring low, eyes darting toward the front. Then silence, because the man at the podium wasn't one of them. Richard Quinn stood there. Perfect suit, perfect posture. Hands resting lightly on either side of the lectern like he owned the wood, the air, the dirt under their boots. A large screen flickered on behind him. Slick graphics, renderings of shiny new buildings, parks, shopping centers, cul-de-sacs that didn't belong here. Across the top in clean white letters, Dry Creek Redevelopment Initiative. Richard let the image breathe before he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, smooth, measured, like a man closing a deal, not making a pitch. "For too long this town has been left behind, forgotten, stagnant." His gaze swept the room, calculating, cold. But it doesn't have to be. A click. The screen shifted, before and after images. On the left, the town as it stood, old, cracked, fading. On the right, clean streets, coffee shops, luxury townhomes, a future scrubbed of every flaw. "We're offering opportunity," Richard continued. "New jobs, modern housing, safer streets, better schools." Jackson's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists beneath the table. Richard pressed a button. Another slide. Parcel maps. Property lines. Half the town highlighted in blue. "The proposal is simple," Richard said. "Fair buyouts. Generous relocation packages, no one left behind unless they choose to be." His voice never rose, never faltered. "But make no mistake, this is happening with you or without you." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. "That's not a proposal," someone muttered. "It's a threat," someone else hissed. But Richard smiled. Thin, polished, dead behind the teeth. "Progress doesn't wait, and neither do we." Then he folded his hands, letting the silence settle like dust. "The choice is yours." Except it wasn't, because everyone in that room knew the truth. There wasn't a choice. Not really. Not when men like Richard Quinn decided what the future looked like and who got erased from it. For a second, nobody moved. Then a chair scraped, slow, deliberate. Alex stood. Every head turned. Even Richard, mid-sentence, mid-smile, froze. His gaze snapped toward her like a whip. Alex walked to the front. Calm, steady. A single folder in her hand. Not fancy. Not dressed in corporate polish, just manila paper. Ink. Truth. She set it down on the table next to the projector. "I think." Her voice was clear, sharp, no tremor. "Everyone deserves to know what this really is." Richard's smile faltered, only for a breath. "Alexandra." "Don't," she cut him off. "Not here." She opened the folder. pulled out the first blueprint, unfolded it, laid it flat where everyone could see. Not shopping centers, not parks, not homes. A military-style training compound. Fences, watchtowers, barracks, concrete lots big enough for convoys. Murmurs sparked like dry grass. Someone gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. Alex flipped to the next page. A legal document. Headline clear as day. Land acquisition through eminent domain. Fast track clause activated. She didn't need to explain. The words spoke louder than any speech. This isn't redevelopment, Alex said, voice steady but edged. It's forced acquisition. He's not building a community. He's building a private training facility right here. On our land. On your land. Faces shifted, eyes widened, anger bubbled under the surface. Richard stepped forward, mask slipping. This is classified. Not anymore. Alex fired back. I leaked it. I sent copies to the county, to the press. Hell, by now it's probably trending. The room buzzed, anger, confusion, disbelief stacking like thunderclouds. You lied to them, she snapped. To everyone, you don't care about this town, you never did. Richard's hands tightened on the podium. You've always been reckless, and you've always believed no one would ever stand up to you. She shot back. Silence, thick, pressurized. Then an old man near the back stood. You're not getting my land. A woman next to him echoed, or mine. More voices, more fists slamming into tables. The air turned electric. Years of frustration, fear, and quiet suffering igniting all at once. Richard's face hardened into stone. You think this changes anything? His voice was low, dark. You have no idea what lines you just crossed. Alex didn't flinch. Yeah, I do. And for the first time in his life, Richard Quinn didn't have the last word. Silence stretched, tight as wire, snapping between breaths. Then from the middle row a voice. Jackson stood. Not loud, not polished, just steady. He stepped forward, boots scuffing the worn floorboards. His hands weren't shaking. Not this time. I've lived here my whole life. He started, voice low but rising. My father lived here. His father before him. The room quieted. Even the buzz of whispered rage pulled back. Leaning in. We didn't build this place with money. We built it with hands, with time, with mornings that started before the sun and nights that ended after it. His gaze swept the crowd, locked eyes with faces he'd known for decades, with faces he'd barely spoken to. Didn't matter. They were his neighbors, his people. Look around, Jackson continued. This isn't just dirt, this isn't just property. He tapped the table with his knuckles, sharp, final. This is inheritance. Not the kind you find in a bank. The kind that lasts longer than we do. The kind that gets past calloused hand to the ones coming next. Sophie peeked from the aisle, small but watching, eyes wide, holding that stuffed raccoon like it was her anchor. We sell this, Jackson said, voice sharper now. We don't just lose land. We lose history. We lose the stories buried in this ground. The weddings, the funerals, the laughs, the fights, all of it. He pointed, first at Richard, then at the blueprints. They want to pave over that, turn it into something that doesn't remember us. A pause, heavy, then clearer, stronger. I say no. His voice echoed against wood and glass, against lungs that hadn't realized they'd stopped breathing. We don't sell, we don't fold, we hold for the ones before us and the ones coming after. A murmur, a ripple, then someone stood. No sale. Another. I'm with you. Then a third, louder. Not for any price. The room broke open, not with chaos, but with clarity. Voices rose, hands clapped shoulders, fists pounded tables. A wave of no so strong it drowned out everything else. Richard stood rigid, stone-faced, watching a grip he thought was permanent fracture. Jackson didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just stood there, straight, solid. A man who finally remembered why he stayed and why he wasn't leaving. 1 month later, the farm didn't look the same. Not perfect, not polished, but alive. The sagging roof had new shingles. Rough cut, a little crooked in spots, but they held. The broken fence line was patched with mismatched wood, oak, pine, whatever was donated, whatever fit. And the garden was something else entirely. Rows of tomatoes stretched under twine, peppers, beans, wildflowers spilling wherever Sophie's hands had tossed seeds without worrying about where they were supposed to go. Near the side yard, a crooked little coop stood. Fresh paint peeling only slightly, door hanging a little askew. But the chickens didn't care. 6 of them now. Fat, loud, busy scratching at the dirt like they'd been there forever. Sophie stood by the coop, hands on her hips, ponytail bouncing as she scattered feed. Her stuffed raccoon, patched and dirt-stained, hung from one arm like it always did. "Come on, Featherface!" she called, chasing a particularly stubborn hen who seemed convinced the food was better on the other side of the fence. From the porch, Jackson watched, elbows resting on his knees, a mug of coffee still steaming, balanced in his hands. He let the scene soak in. The colors, the sounds, the way the morning light hit the new paint like it was proud of itself. Didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like living. Footsteps scuffed behind him. He didn't turn. Didn't have to. Alex sat down next to him, sliding a second coffee mug across the wooden step. "You know," she said, voice softer now. Less armor, more ease. "That chicken's gonna outsmart her one day." Jackson smirked. "Probably already has." They sat in quiet for a beat, just watching, just breathing. "You ever think it'd look like this?" she asked. He shook his head. "Nope." Another pause. Wind stirred the trees. Somewhere a hammer echoed from the neighbor's place, another fence going up. Another roof getting fixed. "You staying?" Jackson asked, voice quieter. Alex didn't answer right away. Just traced the rim of her coffee mug with one thumb. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think I am." He nodded. No smile, but something behind his eyes softened. Sophie's laughter rang out as Featherface made a break for the tool shed. Dust kicked up, wings flapped. The little girl spun after it, half furious, half delighted. Jackson chuckled under his breath. "She's gonna be hell on wheels by the time she's 12. Alex grinned. "She's halfway there already." And for the first time, maybe ever, the space between them wasn't filled with broken things. It was filled with something else, something growing. The well sat at the back of the property. Same old circle of stone, but not the same anymore. A month ago, it was just a dry relic. a hollow reminder of what used to be. But now the pulley creaked with fresh rope. The bucket was new, stained but sturdy. Water glistened at the bottom, cold, clear, real. Jackson stood with Sophie and Alex at the edge. Morning light stretched long shadows across the grass. The breeze was softer here, quieter, like even the wind knew when to be still. Sophie held the shell, that same little spiral of ivory and blue, faded from time, warm from her hands. She traced her thumb along the grooves, then looked up at her dad. "Are you sure?" Jackson nodded, slow. "Yeah, Bug, I'm sure." Alex leaned on the stone wall, watching, quiet but not distant. Her arms weren't folded this time. No walls today. Sophie turned the shell over one more time. "Do you think it still works?" Jackson smirked. "Only one way to find out." They gathered close. 3 hands now. Sophie's small, Jackson's rough, Alex's steady, cradling the shell together. "Make a wish," Jackson murmured. Nobody said it out loud. Didn't need to. They all knew what it was. Sophie counted softly. 1, 2, 3. They let go. The shell tumbled, spiraled, a soft clink against the stone, then the smallest splash, gentle, final. For a second, nobody moved. The wind held its breath. Then Jackson exhaled. Slow, deep, like he'd been holding something in for far too long. "It's gonna be okay," Sophie whispered. Not a question, not a hope, a fact. Alex smiled, small, honest. "Yeah, kiddo, it is." The water below rippled, caught the light, reflected 3 faces leaning over the edge. Not broken, not running, just here, together. And for the first time in a long time, what the well kept wasn't empty. By evening, the sky turned gold. The kind of gold that only happens when the sun knows it's done its work for the day. Warm, soft, spilling over the fields like honey. The farmhouse caught it first. The chipped window frames glowing, the fresh roof turning bronze under the light. The garden shimmered. Even the broken places, the cracks in the fence, the scuffed porch steps looked less like flaws and more like proof that something had been fought for. And won. Sophie raced through the tall grass, barefoot, hair wild, arms stretched wide like wings. One of the chickens, probably Featherface, darted after her, clucking in protest or joy, hard to tell which. Her laughter echoed, bright, weightless. Jackson leaned against the porch railing. Coffee replaced by a cold soda now. Elbows resting on the wood, watching her run like the whole world was hers again. Alex sat on the steps below him. Legs stretched out, boots untied. Her shoulders relaxed. No tension in her jaw. No weight pulling at the corners of her eyes. For a while, nobody said anything. Didn't need to. The wind stirred. Just enough to make the grass dance. Just enough to carry the sound of Sophie's laughter farther than it probably should have reached. A hawk circled high above, silent, steady. Jackson let his gaze sweep across the fields. The barn, the garden, the patch of dirt Sophie swore was going to be a pumpkin patch by fall. "Looks different," he said quietly. Alex tilted her head. "Yeah, it does." "Feels different too." "Yeah," she agreed, softer now. "It does." Sophie spun in the grass, arms flung wide, shouting at the sky like it was listening. And maybe, just maybe, it was. The camera pulls back. Slow. The farmhouse shrinks, the fields stretch wider, the light deepens, gold shifting to amber, then to the soft burn of dusk. Sophie's laughter fades into the wind, not gone, just carried. The screen darkens. One final sound remains. The quiet, steady creak of the porch swing, moving just enough to remind anyone listening. Some things hold, some things stay. Then silence, black, and the sky burned soft gold as the wind carried laughter across the fields. Sophie's little hands pressed a wooden sign into the dirt by the garden gate. Letters painted crooked but clear. Mercer Farm, we're staying. Jackson stood back, arms crossed, watching. Not with pride exactly, something quieter, something heavier and sweeter. Beside him, Alex brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Think it'll hold?" she asked, half teasing. He didn't answer right away, just glanced at the house, the barn, the garden, the chicken coop with a lopsided door, then down to the worn seashell still tucked in his palm. "It already is," Jackson said softly, "and it already is." The camera pulls back one last time. The porch light flicks on, warm, steady. The wind shifts, bending the grass, carrying the sound of something that feels like home. If this story meant something to you, maybe hit that like button. Maybe subscribe. No pressure. Just if you want more stories about holding on, starting over, and remembering that the little things still matter. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.